Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eliot Stone. Thank you for attending our Enverus MineralSoft Revenue Automation Tools webinar. A little bit of an agenda at the front. We're going to explore today what we mean by revenue automation tools. And probably the best way for us to get at this is to just go through some of the challenges that mineral and royalty owners face when trying to process and validate and audit their revenue and their revenue check detail. Once we've gone through some of those challenges and everybody's out, we're all on the same page, then we'll go through some of the solutions that MineralSoft has to offer for those problems. And I'll show you some demo workflows in the MineralSoft platform. If you have any questions while we're going through, feel free to type them into the chat window. And those questions will be aggregated and I'll reach out to you through email with answers to those questions. Also, we'll follow up with everybody who's attended today to get feedback and continue the conversation if you'd like. Also, at the end of today's presentation, I'll draw up a slide that will contain my contact information, phone, and email, so you can certainly reach out before, if we don't get back to you quick enough and you've got a burning question. Also today, as we go through, we're in work from home and environments. There's quite a thunderstorm rolling through Austin as I speak. So if you catch a bunch of thunder rolls in the background of my audio, it's not intentional. We're not trying to make this ominous. We'll have a little fun today talking about revenue automation, as much fun as that can be. In any case, we'll get started. So the first thing that we're going to look at here are, again, the challenges, or at least some of them, that we continually hear from mineral and royalty owners and those we work with. So you'll notice we've got 4 kind of major challenge categories here that we're going to address: reconciling revenue, manual keying, data validation, and missing payments. So let's start with a discussion of what we mean by reconciling revenue. So, every month operators pay out their royalty owners, and the royalty owners often will have, a staff person dedicated to receiving the checks from the operator, and those checks can come in, either direct deposit or paper format, and those need to be posted to the general ledger. But along with those checks, there's also sent from the operator check detail that spells out, what went into the total amount in the check. And that check detail will cover things like production volumes, prices, the decimal interest that you've agreed upon for a given property, any post-production expenses, and all of that detail needs to be brought into the general ledger in a way that associates with entries in the ledger, for a given account. So here's where we have a lot of issues, the problem begins. Some people tell us that they receive these checks and they're able to, account for the checks in their system, and then getting the detail associated with it entered into their general ledger, takes a variety of formats. So some folks will go pull revenue statements from EnergyLink. They download a statement and then upload it into their general ledger and associate it with the check that's been received. Others maybe are receiving CDEX data, which is basically a computer language that conveys the check stub detail from their CDEX source over to their general ledger. What we hear in both these cases is that it can be fairly time consuming to download statements, say from EnergyLink or from an operator owner portal, and then upload it to the statement or to the general ledger, because you have to do this statement by statement. On average, we estimate it takes about 8 minutes per check received to post the check, download the statement, upload it to the general ledger. And, the time it takes to do this, while 8 minutes may not seem like that big a deal, I mean, if you've got hundreds of checks coming in or even thousands of checks coming in every month, it compounds and can be quite a time sink. To further complicate and, make this process, even more of a time sink, is the fact that sometimes CDEX doesn't process accurately or can be error prone when it's being loaded into a general ledger that hasn't been developed specifically to receive CDEX data. And we would say this is the case for the majority, if not all, of our mineral and royalty owners out there. Most of them are using software that was designed for an operator, not for a royalty owner. So a lot of the processes that need to be in place to, add streamlining and automation to the upload of these statements just simply isn't in place out on the market. And I'm sure many of you who have had to deal with, either statement upload or CDEX streams can certainly appreciate what we're saying here. For those of you who don't deal with it in the day-to-day, certainly ask for your patience while we wade through the weeds here. But again, just the metrics of, 8 to 10 minutes per statement, should really stand out to you. The next issue here around reconciling revenue, we have it set up as a different slide, manual keying, but it kind of ties into revenue reconciliation in the sense that, you've received the check, you've posted it to your general ledger. Many of your operators have either provided you with a downloadable royalty statement or are sending you that statement detail through CDEX. But as many of you may know, there are many operators out there who don't send revenue detail, statement detail in anything but a paper format. So they don't make it available for download as a PDF. They don't send it through CDEX. You just receive it in the mail along with your paper check. Now, in this case, there are many back office staff persons who are having to manually key all of the data from these paper statements into their general ledger to complete this revenue reconciliation work. Now, manual keying, it doesn't sound, again, like maybe that would be such a big deal, but I'm sure many of the groups listening in today who know the pains know them well. Sometimes operators will send a couple hundred pages worth of check detail on a given month. And then maybe the next month they send 1,200 pages because what was a 300-page set of check detail is now compounded by prior period adjustments. So there's not really a good way to predict how much time and resource you're going to need month to month to dedicate to the process of manual entry. That's not also to mention, the industry accepted rate of human error that we attribute to manual entry is about 5%. Now, certainly this will expose you to some undue risk, or at least unwanted risk, around tax time and during reports to investors or stakeholders. 5% of what's being entered into your general ledger is not the correct data, just due to human error. I mean, that's a risk we all like to avoid, I'm sure. The other thing to consider here is, and I'm sure many of you have thought this through, if you're your own royalty shop or you're an individual owner of royalties, and let's say you've got a single person dedicated to manual entry, the cost of doing this is not benefited by any kind of economy of scale. And what I mean by that is, if you've got some checks that need to be keyed and entered, If you were to outsource that work to, say, a company like Inveris to do the manual keying on your behalf, we're set up to handle large volumes of out of network check stub manual entry. One, we've got checks and balances against human error in the manual entry process, and two, we have a large enough team to handle manual entry such that we see about a 50% reduction in cost for manual entry compared to an in-house solution. So there's significant benefits for outsourcing the manual entry for the mineral and royalty owner. Scrolling down a bit further, we're going to look at the next challenge and discuss it a bit. Data validation. So, if you're able to overcome the issues of reconciling checks deposited with their revenue statements in your general ledger, and you've got a team to do your manual entry, you figure out a solution for these problems, you would come to the next problem, which is it's never quite clear whether or not the data that you've entered into your system is even correct. Audit is certainly a workflow that should be built into bringing revenue statements and revenue detail into your ledger. Now you can imagine data validation as a monthly process can also be a bit of a time sink. It may not even be clear, however, what I mean by data validation. So let me give you a few examples. Many royalty owners that I talk to, they just tell me, Eliot, we take it on face value that the check detail information that comes along with our checks is correct. We believe that there's no way for the operator to misreport something like the volume of oil produced at a given wellhead. Well, there are errors that occur in systems. I'm sure we're all familiar with errors, and that does crop up frequently in royalty statements. Many owners tell me we would love to be able to compare all of the production volumes that show up on our revenue statements to what a given operator reported to the state regulatory commission for production for that month at that well spot. But that can be pretty complicated. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the way Texas, for instance, reports production volumes at the state level. It's reported lease by lease, not well by well, though the production volumes that show up on your check stub are, of course, shown on a well by well basis. So confirming that what the operator has reported to you in terms of volume is not as easy as just running a report on a regulatory commission website and comparing it to the check stub. There's significant amounts of kind of calculation and data cleaning that needs to happen before you can estimate whether or not those volumes are correct. Similarly, it's not always clear whether or not the commodity prices that show up on your check stub are similar to or identical to what a given price index was for the area in which your product was produced on a given date. And validating prices requires similarly significant effort. The next data validation category would be your decimal interest. So let's just assume we've worked with our operator and we've come up with an agreed upon decimal interest for, on a given division order. We've signed it, sent it back to them. Well, every month, if you're getting thousands of pages or hundreds of pages of check detail, the decimal interest shows up on every line of every check stub, along with your prices and volumes for a given property code. So, you've got to go through and do this manual work of comparing all of your division orders to their respective property codes on check stubs. If you have all of your decimals only on the division order, filed in paper format in a cabinet, maybe over in your land department, but your revenue auditor needs access to those every month, Well, this can be, again, quite a time sink of revenue auditors walking through your office, going over, digging through filing cabinets, finding the division orders, bringing them back over to their desk, running through the paper statements, validating line by line the decimal interest on every check stub. Again, quite a manual process. The last data validation category here worth mentioning is that of post-production deductions. Again, for those who maybe have a more generalist perspective on what we're learning here today, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but for those who do work in the weeds, I'm sure we're familiar with post-production expense being something that can be regulated by a lease. So there are cost-free leases out there that enumerate which, if any, post-production expenses, things like transportation or marketing or sweetening, can be deducted from a royalty check. Now, if you're a royalty auditor and you're pouring through check stubs and say you're not as familiar with the leases that correspond to and govern the wells that are showing up on a given check stub, the process of determining whether or not post-production expense is allowed ends up, again, being quite a manual process every month of pulling leases out of filing cabinets, reading through the leasing provisions, and then applying that deduction restriction to the deductions that show up on the royalty statement. And then once you've determined whether or not these deductions can be taken away, you have to aggregate that data and send it over to another team member who may be responsible for going after those deductions and recouping them from the operator. So again, we can see where there's significant manual work required to ensure that data on the check stubs is correct, and then that data, once validated, can be used to recoup lost funds, whether that be in misreported volumes, misreported prices, or improper deductions. So we'll move on from there to the last challenge that we're going to cover today, and that's the challenge of missing payments. So certainly every month, a revenue auditing team would look for whether or not an operator that has been sending them checks in the past sent them a check in a given month. While this may seem, again, like something that shouldn't be too difficult to keep track of, for many of the royalty owners that we speak with, at scale, this can become quite a problem. Making sure that you've been paid every month by every operator who's supposed to pay you can be tricky. Certainly if we're in areas where, periodic shut-ins are allowed, or maybe you've got an operator who's only paying you quarterly, or, there are all different ways in which tracking specific check payments can become complicated. And that isn't even to mention, again, a more in the weeds point. Just because an operator has sent you a check doesn't mean that they've sent you a check that pays you for every single well that should be included on that check. We speak to a lot of royalty owners who say that, for years they'd just been cashing checks and not really looking into the statement detail, only to, pay for an audit and find that for years, there were many wells that were producing on their properties that never showed up on a check stub, or maybe showed up on the check stub once and then, after that didn't show up again, and all of those funds were sitting in suspense. Quick anecdote, I mean, we've got a group that signed up with us maybe 2 years ago. It's a federal agency, and they're not really oil and gas focused. They just happen to own oil and gas properties all over the country. And we got them signed up onto MineralSoft, and through using our solutions, we're able to identify significant funds in suspense. And by significant, I mean, up in the millions worth of suspended funds, based on this very problem. wells that we're producing that weren't showing up on their check stubs. So we'll scroll down now and discuss some of the ways in which MineralSoft addresses these problems. And we're going to pop back and forth between the slide deck that you're looking at now and quick demonstrations in the MineralSoft platform of the solutions that we offer. So the very first thing that we're going to look at is the issue of reconciling revenue. And as you recall from our earlier discussion, this is again that problem where every month, we deposit a check from an operator and we receive revenue statements in various formats and have to reconcile those two together in the general ledger. So the first thing to mention here is that in MineralSoft, this MineralSoft's a product owned by Enverus, and so are some of the major data exchange networks out there, EnergyLink, OilDex. We've all been kind of acquired and brought under one roof in the last a year or two, and we've integrated these products as one solution. So what does that mean for you? In MineralSoft, there's no need to download any statements from EnergyLink or pull any statements from operator websites or coordinate the download and upload of CDEX data. It's all integrated directly into the MineralSoft platform. So your statements show up as soon as they're issued from the operator. Often you'll receive statements before you even receive the check. That detail goes directly into your MineralSoft account. So let me pop over to the MineralSoft platform and show you briefly, what this would look like within MineralSoft. So you're looking at a page within MineralSoft now, the statements page. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see our logo, MineralSoft, and then down below it, a whole lot of different labels and icons. This is the navigation menu of MineralSoft. And again, we're in the area of the platform called the statements page. So looking at the statements page, we see a data grid with several column headers. And this data grid is editable, searchable, sortable, and you can move, columns around. You can filter columns. You can click the Adjust Columns button and determine what kind of information you want to show up on this particular chart. So, we can turn on things like check number or owner number, take them off if you don't need them, to create these customized reports of the statements that have come in to your MineralSoft account. So what are we looking at here? This column header ID, all these hyperlinked numbers, those are links that take you over to a page focused on each statement that you've received. The next column will show you the operator that statement came from. The next column here shows you the date that the revenue statement was received. Then we'll see this blank column, the revenue received date. So what this particular statement page allows you to do is go through and filter out all of your statements by the date they were received. We've done that, by the earliest date at the top. And you can select any one of these. We'll select these two because these statements arrived on the same date. And we can click this button, set the revenue received date. So, many folks will receive revenue on a given date, but they don't want to deposit the check until the next month. Maybe they're, running their accounting in a cash accrual sense, or maybe they have other reasons why they want to post 1 month, even though they received the revenue earlier. This allows you to do that through the click of a single set revenue received date button. This is also a good way to, again, reconcile the statement data that you've received with the date you posted your check to your general ledger. So, again, we received both of these checks on September 25th, 2013. We'll set the revenue recognition date by popping through years here. We'll go to 2013. We'll do it October 1st. Submit that. And now we've got that same statement data grid. These two checks that showed up on the 25th of September 2013, we've recognized their revenue on October 1st. So again, very quick way to reconcile the revenue receipt with the check detail, and saves you tremendous time in terms of entering the check detail into a given system. Now, this takes me over to one more thing I want to show you quickly in the platform. If we were to click on any one of these IDs, it'll take us to a specific page dedicated to that specific statement. So on this page, you'll see the payor, the check date, check number, summary amounts. Now we're looking at this chart that says revenue, products, adjustments. This is a visualization of the check detail that came in on this particular statement. So we're seeing owner gross, adjustment totals, and nets. We can look over at products that came in on the check. This will show you our oil, gas, liquids, or any other products that are tracked on the revenue statement, along with pricing. And then we can move over to adjustments. So these are those post-production expenses, again, aggregated here and visualized. Scrolling down a bit, we'll see a list of all of the wells and units that have showed up as property codes on this statement, and they all hyperlink over to information pages specific to the well or unit, and we'll get into that a little later. So again, the point here is that no need to manually post any of these check details, and once it's brought in, you have clear analytics and visualizations available to you. So we're going to pop back over to the slide deck. The next solution we're going to discuss is our solution around manual keying, and this kind of ties into reconciling revenue. But I wanted to give you a little bit more understanding of how we handle the manual entry. So for all those operators out there that did not send through EnergyLink, who aren't available in an electronic format, all that MineralSoft clients have to do is scan a PDF copy of that paper check they receive in the mail and drag and drop it into the MineralSoft platform. We receive it, and we have a service level agreements with our clients that allow for 72 or 24-hour turnaround times. We're able to do this because we have an extensive team of data clerks who will manually key, and we're able to reduce error significantly, almost to a point where it's non-existent. And the way that we do this is we have two people key the same check at the same time. And if we come up with any discrepancies between the data that was entered by the two clerks, that will help us hone in on any manual entry errors. We also offer the advantage of a fixed price in this solution. We don't charge by the line for manual entry. It's a flat fee that's the same fee you pay per property code for the electronic EnergyLink transfer. Pricing, of course, is something we're not going to discuss here, but if you have questions about that, certainly feel free to reach out to me after, or type that question in your chat window. So let me pop back over to the MineralSoft platform quickly and just show you one quick thing. Where it says add check stubs over on the left-hand side, I'm hovering my mouse over it. That's where you would drag and drop a scanned PDF of your statements, your paper statements. And again, in 3 days, you'll see what you're looking at here on the statement detail page as a representation of that keyed statement. So we're going to move on now from manual entry and reconciling revenue to the next challenge that we had discussed, which was that of data validation. So you may recall that there are several different points on the check stub where data may be incorrect. So the first I'd like to mention is that of pricing. So certainly validating prices for a given payment can be a challenge for a lot of mineral owners. We've built in to the background of MineralSoft a series of algorithms that will automatically run pricing audits on every line of every check stub that comes into MineralSoft, whether it's manually keyed by our team or brought in an electronic format. If the pricing shown on any line of a check detail page doesn't fall within the bounds of our algorithms, our team is notified and our team will investigate why that check failed. If you want more detail on what exactly the algorithm looks for, what its boundaries are, etc., email me after and I will send you a one-page spec sheet that kind of describes how that what that algorithm looks for and what its bounds are. The next issue that we discussed in terms of data validation is that of volumes. How do we ensure that the volumes that come in on check detail match what is reported to the state? And then I guess the other would be, well, let me pop over and show you that first. So you may recall when we first looked at the MineralSoft platform a second ago, we saw a list of all of the statements that come into MineralSoft. Well, over on the left-hand side in this navigation menu, there's also a page called My Wells. And if I were to click on My Wells, I would get a list of all the wells in my portfolio. Now, if I click on any one of these wells, I'll be taken to a well detail page. And on that well detail page, I can learn a little bit about the location of the well, API number, etc. But scrolling down, we'll see that same revenue, product, and adjustment chart we saw earlier on the statement page. But this is specific to this individual well. So the question of whether or not products are reported correctly on the check stub can be answered by first clicking on the products tab and setting it up in a monthly trend. So we'll see based on month-to-month production reporting what we've received on the check stub volume-wise. Now, if we scroll down to the next chart on the page under production, we see a chart here that shows us month by month in the green columns, the volume that showed up on the State Regulatory Commission website, what was reported to the state. And then you'll notice there's a gray line that courses across the top of these bar charts. That gray line is the volume that was reported on the check stub detail. So in this case, it seems that there's no discrepancy between state reported volumes and check stub volumes. This is, of course, an ideal demo account. I'm sure many of you would suspect that there might be more of a discrepancy there, and you'd probably be right. So you can run the same kind of visualized comparison between check stub production volume and public reported production volume on both oil and gas. The next issue in data validation that we mentioned earlier is that of decimal interests. How do we know that the decimal that showed up on my check stub is the same decimal that I've agreed upon in my division order? And how do we do that in a less manual and time-consuming way? So again, looking over on the left-hand side of the screen, if we scroll down, there's an area called decimals. We're going to look at that in just a second. But first I want to mention on this well page, you can enter in a hyperlink to your division order related to this well, and the decimals that show up related to this particular well. So in this case, it looks like we have two different interests in the well. One settlement decimal is 0.05, one is 0.002. So we'll pop over again to this decimals area of the software and show you how this audit works. So you may recall again, in the very beginning, we looked at the statements page and there was a whole list of all the statements that we've received. We've looked at the My Wells page and there was a list of all the wells in the portfolio. We're now looking at a list of all settlement decimals. So all of your division orders that you've received are listed here. This page also allows you to edit the column headers, determine what columns you want to show up in this chart, which ones you don't, so that you can run helpful reports. In this case, what we're going to do is compare settlement decimal. So that's the decimal that has shown up on a division order that you've agreed upon. And then what's showing up on your check stubs, the revenue deck decimal. So we were just looking at a particular well, the Midkiff 4217. So we're going to filter to that particular well, Midkiff 4217. And there we are. Now you remember there was two interests in that well, one at 0.05% and one at 0.002. So we've set up this report to show us, one, the well name, two, the decimal from the division order. And now we can see in these columns here, the most recent date we were paid and a link to the statement that came in on that date. And this revenue deck decimal, that's the decimal that showed up for these wells on those statements. So we can see in just a quick look that that was correct. Scrolling over here to the right a little bit, just a few other things to throw in there. We can, there's a column that allows you to click yes or no, approved yes or no. This allows you to keep track of whether or not you've audited the statement and approved the decimal. So again, much faster than the manual approach, much more streamlined. You don't have to enter the check stub detail every month. It gets broken out and filtered to this particular settlement decimal tool. Your division orders don't have to be dug out of a filing cabinet. That settlement decimal shows up in a column immediately adjacent to what showed up on the check stub. The last thing that we discussed earlier around auditing revenue for proper payment, that was the category of post-production expense, and whether or not post-production expenses are showing up on wells that are tied to leases that have a cost-free provision. So there's a couple ways that we can get at this. First, we're going to pop over to a given lease. So we'll look at the lease page here in MineralSoft, and the structure should all start to be a little bit familiar to you at this point. We're looking at a list of all of the leases that we're in. And we're going to click on one out in Midland that is operated by XTO. And when we click on that lease, we're going to get taken over to this lease's specific information page. And we'll see that indeed this is a cost-free lease. We've selected that option. Scrolling down, we'll see all the revenue associated with wells that are tied to this lease. And we can click on the Adjustments tab and pretty quickly determine that, in the last 12 months, which is what the time filter is set to, we've indeed had multiple deductions taken out of the revenue on wells tied to this lease. So if we scroll down a little bit further, we'll see here there's a tab called the Cost-Free Audit. So if we show the details, we'll see a data grid that shows us one, the check number that a improper deduction showed up on, the date it was received, the total value of the check, and then the amount or value of the post-production expenses taken out of your revenue. So very quickly, you've got a full list, and you can even open up detail here a little further and see what categories and what amounts showed up on that check in terms of, suspected improper deduction. Further, these deductions, you don't have to dig all the way into the lease page to get to them. If you've marked a lease as cost-free and tied wells to that lease, when revenue comes into MineralSoft, again, automatically, these improper deduction amounts that the system identifies will aggregate here in the left-hand side of the screen. You see in the navigation menu, there's an area called Action Items. A full list of your improper deductions will show up there in a cost-free audit section of Action Items. So we're going to pop back now to the slide deck and have a look at our last challenge that we've discussed and how we solve for it. And that's the issue of missing payments. And you may recall missing payments means maybe an operator that's been paying you regularly in the past decided or made an error and didn't send you a check 1 month. Or maybe they did send you a check, but wells that they should have paid you on did not show up in that check. So how do we solve for that in MineralSoft? Looking back at the platform, you can imagine it'll be a pretty similar process to what I've showed you. We're going to visit the My Wells page. So in the My Wells page, we have a list of all of our wells. And again, we can adjust column headers here to show us the kinds of detail that we want to track to get to these insights. Have I been paid on everything I should be? So we've adjusted columns in this case to show us the name of the well, the operator of the well, the last posted statement number, and the last posted statement date, and then the well status. So, we're digging in here and we see, most of these wells were paid last on April 25th, 2020. Now, if we look down the list, just cast a glance, we'll eventually see one of these wells that was paid October 25th, 2018. That was the last time we got a payment for that well. There are many reasons why a well might fall off a check stub. And one of those reasons could be the well status has changed. It's become an inactive well or it's been shut in, something like this. So very quickly looking at this report, which by the way, generating in a more manual sense would be virtually impossible or so time consuming, it might not be worth it. We're able to determine that this particular well has a very legitimate reason why it's fallen off a check stub. And that saved us the time of calling the operator and getting passed through multiple channels and put on hold to figure out that really the issue is just, a question of well status. But if any of these dates, let's say you've been paid on the JSIC 12H every month consistently, and then 1 month it drops off. Again, in Action Items, you'll get a notification letting you know that a well that you've historically been paid on is no longer in pay. Similarly, if you've received payment from a given operator, uh, you know, within a certain cadence, like if they paid you every 3 months for a while or every month for a while, if that cadence changes and we don't receive a check from an operator a given month, you'll get notified in action items. So I guess the answer to this question is we have, kind of algorithms going on in the background that are monitoring your payments and will notify you with any changes. So popping back over to the slide deck, here's a quick summary of what we discussed today and kind of the challenges versus solutions. I can send out this slide deck to anybody who's interested, who wants to go back through and read it. Again, just either type that in as a question here or send me an email. Also, here's my contact information, phone number and email address. Feel free to reach out to either or both, and we'll continue the conversation. Also, I'll follow up. So will some of my colleagues to get your feedback on this presentation, and certainly to continue the conversation if you so wish. And again, any questions that you've sent in through the chat window during this presentation will be addressed. Thank you all for your time and attention today, and look forward to talking with you again soon.